Episode 2 of the Metro podcast. Bryan Schwartz here, and Teddy Marantz is right there as well. We've got a lot coming for you on this second episode of the show. Lots to get to, Ted. First of all, how are you?
Not too bad. Quarantine's still killing me. No sports. We're got to catch out the Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance. That's been my fill of sports for the week. It's been rough, but I'm glad to be back on here for another episode.
And before we even start, no matter what you thought of the Michael Jordan documentary, the best part to me was seeing everybody on Twitter all coming together for one thing. Finally, again, sports Twitter was back, and I know I've missed that. I'm sure you the same.
We've all been waiting, first of all, for The Last Dance, and I've been waiting to see sports Twitter come back and seeing all these debates flare up again. Every time we talk about Michael Jordan and LeBron James, or anytime we talk about Michael Jordan, that the LeBron James Michael Jordan argument is going to come up. So it was entertaining seeing that blowing up all over Twitter. It was entertaining seeing players, coaches, fans, everyone coming together and enjoying that the Last Dance documentary.
Well, it seemed like Mets Twitter almost started to come together yesterday when we heard the news that Alex Rodriguez and Jennifer Lopez are interested in purchasing a big stake in the New York Mets. And when I first read that, it almost didn't surprise me a little bit because when the ownership stuff started with the Mets and Jeff Wilpon and the rest of the Wilpons and the Salcats trying to sell the team, you thought of, could you imagine if A-Rod bought the team? And I'm sure deep down inside of him, he says he grew up a Mets fan. He's a baseball lifer guy. Him and J-Lo, he's broadcasting. J-Lo's still performing, but what else are they doing now? How fun would that be to own a team? And now it's kind of starting to come together where they're starting to round up some investors and maybe they could purchase the Mets. How does that make you feel?
Well, we had an idea that the Mets were still going to be looking to sell after the failed attempt, over the winter. And they said, the Wilpons that they were still going to have someone handling the sale of the team and that they were still going to be looking into it. And then I love the idea of A-Rod and J-Lo buying a team because we know they don't necessarily have the money to buy it themselves. It's going to take a lot of effort on their part to come to, to get the money together, to get investors so that they can make this bid on the team. But that said, with all that effort that it's going to take, you know that they're going to be invested. You know that A-Rod is going to be invested into this team if he's going to have to go through all this to try and buy the team.
Yeah, I think the best part is that you see the passion from Alex Rodriguez, and he had that whole thing with the steroids, 10 years ago or whatever it was, and he's really seemed to move past it. He's learned from it. He's become a fan favorite in a way, whereas he was public enemy number one just like 10 years ago. Now he's the face of Fox, the face of Sunday Night Baseball. Everybody seems to love him now, so why not at this point? You're looking for an owner. You're looking for someone that's passionate. You're looking for, a cool guy that everyone loves. But what better than A-Rod and J-Lo? You're going to have Jennifer Lopez performing seventh inning stretch. Take me out to the ball game with J-Lo in the seventh inning. A-Rod signing autographs, talking to players before the games, talking to the fans. What better than that to me? It's a no-brainer. If they're able to round up the money, you got to do it. Get it done. A-Rod owning the Mets. How about that? That would be nuts.
And, if you're A-Rod, it's a no-brainer almost because you don't even – before you even get started in baseball operations and, how you want the team to run, all you have to do is buy the team and you're going to be the love because every fan wants to see the team sold. So all you have to do if you're A-Rod, who is already liked, and, you have this great celebrity couple with A-Rod and J-Lo who everyone loves, all you have to do is buy the team. And right off the bat, you're going to be in good standing with the fans because we're just going to be happy to see the Wilpons out.
And look what Derek Jeter's doing in Miami, too. This is a guy that had no sort of front office experience, no ownership experience. Right. He was just a baseball guy that has a passion for this game and wants to make an organization, a team better. And, he's had his struggles so far with Miami because that organization has clearly had its ups and downs and has some financial issues, but look, they're on the up and up right now, and he's, putting that all together and being patient with that team. A-Rod could kind of do the same thing with the Mets, but he doesn't need to be as patient because, first of all, they're in New York. He'll potentially have the investors that have a ton of money that will want to spend it on a winner at Citi Field, and he's A-Rod. That's fun. That's going to get the fans pumped. That's going to get the fans involved. And where, the last few years, maybe they haven't because the ownership hasn't spent on some of the free agents that you wish they could have. And, now they're going to be excited about it. I think A-Rod and J-Lo, that would be fantastic for the Mets.
And something else, you have to think about, and something is that A-Rod knows baseball, and we know he knows baseball. Another obstacle that he's not going to have to overcome that Jeter certainly has is attendance and the fan base. And the Mets already have a great fan base.
And it's going to be sold out every night.
Right.
The key is for the Mets, if you put a good team on the field, if you put great players out there, good starting pitchers every single night, the fans are going to be into it. It's going to be a random Wednesday in August playing against the Marlins. It's going to be packed if the team is good. The problem is it just hasn't been good the last few years.
Right. I know I'll be into it.
Absolutely. I mean, who wouldn't? So with this A-Rod J-Lo news, this kind of got me and Teddy thinking of if you could pick any celebrity, any person, any human being in the entire world to own the Mets, who would it be?
I had to put a lot of thought into this. That's a great question. At first, as I said to you, I was thinking, New York celebrities who don't have the money, that's for sure at the moment, but who would be fun to watch on the team. I thought about Larry David or Howard Stern, two New York celebrities who are also hilarious and big personalities. They're entertaining, and it would be entertaining to watch. But if I had to pick someone with the money, possibly the passion and the interest, I'd have to go with Elon Musk. How can I not? He's absolutely loaded and capable of buying the team as is, right? And money will never be an issue. And he's also, again, a very great personality. You follow him on Twitter, you see he's always tweeting memes. He's a man of the people almost, it seems like.
That's what you need as an owner to me.
Right.
You need someone that the fans are going to embrace. That's something the Mets have not had. That's something most of these New York teams just haven't had. Someone that's almost down to earth and just feels like one of you.
You see so many billionaires who are almost out of touch with the regular fan of a sports team. And Elon Musk gives you the comfort of he might not be that. He's certainly more in touch than most.
Yeah, he would be pretty interesting. For me, I talked about Jerry Seinfeld just because of how big a Mets fan and he is, and because of the celebrity that he is. But obviously, he probably doesn't have the money to buy the Mets. He probably doesn't want to. The other person that I thought about was Mike Piazza, and obviously, we all know how great of a Met he was, a Mets Hall of Famer, a Hall of Famer in Cooperstown in Major League Baseball. He owns a third division Italian soccer club called AC Reggiana in Reggio Emilia. I have no idea if I pronounced that correctly, but look, he's already an owner for a soccer team. Clearly, he loves running organizations as he's doing there. He has a passion for baseball. He's one of the all-time greatest catchers in Major League history. He's one of the all-time greatest Mets. Might even be the best offensive Met of all time. Mike Piazza would be pretty cool. Obviously, he, like A-Rod and like J-Lo, would need to get the group of investors to come together to help him out. But Mike Piazza would be really, really cool to me. And look, every Mets fans our age, Mets fans in this younger group grew up idolizing him, grew up with him as their favorite player. So a guy like that to own the team, everybody is going to be locked in. Everybody would be excited about that. So Mike Piazza would be one. The other one that I just kept circling back to every time I thought about this question, and he's not the biggest celebrity, but Steve Cohen. Obviously, it doesn't look like it's going to happen right now or anymore at all. But this is a guy that's one of the wealthiest people in the country. He grew up a huge Mets fan. He's in the New York area. He's a Wall Street guy. He'll do whatever it takes to win. He'll spend on any player possible. That's the perfect guy to own the team. It's obviously not going to happen now as things fell through. But all of that combined together, he just fits the mold of what you want to own this New York Mets organization.
And you brought up Mike Piazza, and if I was going, if this whole thing with A-Rod wasn't happening and we were talking about the same topic, speaking of former players, I probably would pick A-Rod. He'd be up there on my list. So that's what's even cooler about the fact that A-Rod is looking into actually like going out and buying this team, is the fact that if you had asked me this question and the stuff with A-Rod wasn't happening right now, I would probably pick A-Rod. He'd be in on top of that list of former
Yeah,
players.
no doubt. So we'll see what happens. It should be interesting to see whether A-Rod and J-Lo can actually put it all together,
Right.
and put in a bid for the Mets ownership. That would be really cool. All right. Next thing we have, this picture was on Amazin Army on Wednesday. Pick your starting five. So we've got 25 of the best starting pitchers in all-time Mets history. You got $15. Who's your starting rotation?
All right. So when I see these types of pictures, they're always popping up on Twitter. I tend to go one from each row, make it nice and simple, especially in this case with a starting five. So from the $5 column, I'm going to have to go with Jake DeGrom. I love DeGrom. We all probably love DeGrom. I would hope everyone loves DeGrom if you're a Met fan. And now he's a two-time Cy Young winner, and who knows, he has shown no signs of slowing down. I want him leading that rotation. Right behind him, I'm going to take R.A. Dickey as a Met. Obviously, that's another. We know exactly what he was capable of. That he had an incredible, that one huge year with the Mets. After that, I have to go Syndergaard only because I love him. We know again his physical abilities, and you have to think in that rotation. That's a great number three. Syndergaard is always going to be a great third pitcher in your rotation. After that, I have to go Frank Viola, and I'll round out the rotation with the fan favorite, my favorite, Bartolo Colon.
Yeah, how could you not put Bartolo Colon out of that entire list? I mean, one of the most fun
Easy.
pitchers to watch as a Met. 40 years old and still throwing strikes every single pitch. I had Bartolo Colon in mind. He was my $1 guy. I also had Frank Viola as my $2 guy. Early 90s, he only pitched for the Mets for 2 years, 1990, 1991. He went 20-12 with a 2.67 ERA in 1990. He led the league in starts and innings pitched. Absolute workhorse and all-star both seasons with the Mets. I think no doubt you got to put Sweet Music up there. My
Yeah.
$3 guy was Sid Fernandez, one of the biggest parts of the 1986 Mets World Championship team. From 86 to 93 as a Met, he was really, really good and very consistent over that span of time. Never an ERA as high as 3.81 over a 7-8 year span like that. Take that any day now. My $4 guy was Matt Harvey. You look at the prime of this guy's career and you really wish that he didn't have to go through thoracic outlet syndrome and whatever else he's gone through. This guy was a stud. Every fifth day, it was Happy Harvey Day. It was a big deal to be watching this guy every fifth day out on the mound. And, what he was able to do in 2013 and then in the playoff run in 2015, yes, he's remembered for that ninth inning against the Royals in Game 5 of the World Series where, things started to come apart. But look what he did the first 8 innings of that game. He was excellent. He was dominant. He was one of the best pitchers in baseball. So I had to go with Matt Harvey, just thinking about the prime of his career right there. My number 5 is obviously Jacob deGrom, just considering what he's done the last couple of years. Back-to-back Cy Youngs, the ERAs way low twos and even one. Jacob deGrom every fifth day, you know what you're going to get. You know you're going to get 7 innings. You know you're going to get 1 or 2 runs. It's a shame the Mets haven't scored enough for him to give him all these wins. But what Jacob deGrom has done the last few years, and hopefully he continues the next few years, is just truly remarkable. It's really unreal. I almost went with Tom Seaver just because he's, the all-time Met, the all-time great, and we know what he's done in his career. But my little recency bias here had me going with Jacob deGrom as my number 5.
Couldn't agree more.
So that is our starting 5 of the U. Pick your starting rotation with $15. You can check that out on Amazin Army on Twitter and give us yours. Drop those below. We'd love to see what starting rotations you have of the all-time Mets starting pitchers. All right, now it's time to talk some NFL draft. And with that, we have our buddy Eric Hett joining us. Eric and Teddy and I are going to give you a little bit about the Jets, a little bit about the Giants with the New York NFL draft coming up in just a couple of days. So we'll start with the Jets. And the biggest thing for the Jets is the first round questions, whether you go offensive line, wide receiver, or anything else. Most likely it's going to be an offensive lineman or a wide receiver. I want to get your guys' thoughts. Where are you going? Are you going offensive line, or are you going that number one guy out for Sam Darnold, like a Jerry Jeudy, like a CeeDee Lamb?
I'm going with the Jets, so I like the 11th pick is going to be interesting because those first 10 picks, you don't know who's going to want to go get one of those offensive tackles. For the Giants, at the 4th pick, a lot simpler. I think that most likely Jedrick Wills will be there, the offensive tackle out of Alabama. I think he's a no-brainer for them. And Giants fans aren't going to like to hear that because they want to hear, a lot of them want to see Isaiah Simmons. They want to see that freak athlete defensive player. But you need to protect Daniel Jones. Now, assuming they do go Jedrick Wills, which, again, if I was them, I would, that leaves 3 offensive tackles, all very talented. There's differences in polish. Andrew Thomas is still left. He's probably the most polished one left. But then you have Wirfs and Becton, who could be in the right, they're going to need to be in the right system, but they're freak athletes. Mekhi Becton is a physical specimen. He's an enormous player, and yet moves he moves like unrealistically for someone that size. He's quick. Where I get concerned with that 11th pick is, do I trust with the way things have gone in the past for the Jets to take someone like that and develop them and their technique into a game-changing offensive tackle? That's as opposed to taking a Jerry Jeudy or a CeeDee Lamb, who, you've got Jeudy, who's a route technician. He can run any route. He runs them beautifully. Someone Darnold can really use. I think him or Lamb would be the pick there if you don't have Thomas on the board or Wills.
Bryan and Ted, thanks for having me on, guys. I mean, right there with Ted, I think at 11, you have to go offensive tackle or that wide receiver. I mean, the draft is the deepest at wide receiver, so maybe you shy away from that in the first round. Maybe you can trade back to that, 14 to 20 range, and you're able to get still a high-level talent. But I think without a doubt, you got to go wide receiver, offensive tackle. If the Jets are able to trade back, like I had said, maybe you get an extra second-round pick this year. I would hope they get an extra second-round pick this year if they're trading back, because a team is going to be able to move up to that 11th slot and take their franchise tackle or wide receiver. But
Right.
Jets, they need assets, right? They have 8 picks this year already. They have a lot of holes to fill on both sides of the football. I'm okay moving back. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would be totally fine moving back, especially if you could get that extra second or third in this year's draft, because like you said, you need as many picks as possible because you have so many holes on this roster. I mean, you name it, the position is probably needs to be upgraded in a way. So yes, I would suggest the Jets taking an offensive line with the number 11 pick if they move back and can still get an Andrew Thomas in that 15 to 17, 18 range. I think you absolutely should do that if you can add another second or third or wherever it may be. I think you got to go offensive line in the first round, because when you look at what the Jets have done and you look at other teams that have been successful in recent years, where do they start with their team? It's always obviously the quarterback and it's the offensive line. And you look at the last successful Jets team. Who did they draft? D'Brickashaw Ferguson and Nick Mangold in the first round, and those two became the cornerstones to that team that went to the AFC Championship 2 years in a row with Mark Sanchez. We know that Mark Sanchez wasn't the best quarterback in the world, but he was always well protected, and they always had a good running game. And that's what the Jets can put together around Sam Darnold now. You can put together a really good offensive line. You have a great running back, and then you get – this is one of the deepest wide receiver classes there's been in a really, really long time. You can get a guy like a Pittman or Higgins or, any of these guys in the second round, maybe even the third round if they drop that much. There's so many of them that I think you have to go offensive line first, and you take your chances. You probably get a wide receiver in the second, and then you figure it out from there, whether it's an edge rusher or cornerback later in the draft, more offensive linemen. I think that's the way to go if I were the GM of the Jets.
I will say, if you're asking about team needs for the Jets, right off the bat, I think offensive tackle is the most prominent need. You need to fill. I would fill both of those holes. I consider both sides of that offensive line at the tackle position holes at the moment. I would fill those, and I think if you do that, you could live with the interior of the offensive line, the guards and the center. Right now, they're not. I don't think they're the best in the league, but I think that with two competent offensive tackles, you can live for this year, and it can get the job done. You never know. Guys like that, when they're all together, they work well together. You never know. That could be an offensive line that thrives. With that said, I would go with, as the second need, I would go with wide receiver, and not just that, but I think they need 2 wide receivers out of this draft. And somewhere from that, if you're going to go offensive tackle in the first round, somewhere between that second round pick and the 4th round pick, you got to squeeze 2 wide receivers in there, whether it be trading back, trading up, getting more picks. And that's why I think I agree with there. They need to trade back from that 11th pick. They need to get more picks because they have so many needs, even when it comes to, so then after wide receiver, you got edge, you need a pass rusher. That's been a problem. You need a cornerback desperately, I think. And then after that, there's so much more that you need, maybe not as much, but you need depth. We have Adams behind Le'Veon Bell right now. We need someone behind Le'Veon Bell. We need more wide receiver depth. We need depth all over the defense, really. There's a lot that can go wrong. And yes, they have picks right now. They have 8. I don't know if that's enough for a team that really, has holes to fill.
Especially when you have 8 draft picks, what are the odds that all 8 hit?
Right.
Right. The right odds are probably that maybe 3 or 4 become good players. So, yeah, getting that extra asset or 2, trading down a few spots, if you're still able to get your guy, it's definitely worth it to me.
Absolutely.
All right. So we talk about trading down. The Giants have been rumored to potentially trade down as well because they have the number 4 pick. Clearly, they prioritize protecting Daniel Jones as they should. They could potentially get an offensive lineman, or if they stick at 4, maybe they get Isaiah Simmons, or even if they move down because a team that's trading up wants to get one of these quarterbacks, maybe they could get Simmons a little bit later in the draft if possible. What are your guys' thoughts of what the Giants should do in the NFL draft?
So right off the bat, I think it would be a mistake to trade down unless it was it would have to be a ton of picks you're getting in return. Jedrick Wills is polished. He can play the left side. He can play the right side. He's a great player, and you need to protect, as same with Darnold, you need to protect your quarterback, your young quarterback who can't really progress without that protection. The Giants have some good receivers. They have a great running back, probably the best in the league. They have a good tight end to go with basically another receiver at tight end. They have, again, a group of good receivers. They can get one even maybe later in the draft. And so unlike the Jets, the Giants have all those tools for Daniel Jones, and they really just need to protect him a little better. And I think Jedrick Wills is a no-brainer there.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Giants need to protect Daniel Jones, of course. You got to build from the offensive line. They have the receivers. They have the running back. But then again, you look at the defense last year, and it was a disaster. I mean, to add a guy like Isaiah Simmons that could play all over the place and just be a beast on the defensive end, Eric, I think that is very important as well.
Yeah, I mean, defense is obviously very important. They traded back into the first round last year to get their guy out of Georgia, Baker, the cornerback. I mean, that guy was a train wreck last year. He couldn't cover most teams' second or third best wide receiver. I think defense is definitely a priority. And I think when you have a pick in the top 5, usually both sides of the football are a priority in the draft. So one thing that I think is key to watch for the Giants, you have the Lions ahead of them at 3. A lot of speculation that they're going to be trading back. A little bit of a rumor going on that Miami might want to trade into that 3rd spot to get one of those tackles that a lot of analysts have graded as a franchise-level tackle for the next 10, 12 years. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what the Lions do at 3. Maybe Miami trades up and that run on tackles starts a little bit sooner than the Giants might have expected. Then I think they might want to stay in that 4th pick slot, get your guy like Wirfs, get your guy like Jedrick Wills, because after those top 4 offensive tackles are gone, there's still going to be those defensive pieces that they could probably get later on in the draft. So I think keep an eye out what the Dolphins and the Lions do surrounding the Giants. But I think you got to go with an offensive tackle there. So like you guys had said, you got to protect Daniel Jones at all costs.
And you got to remember, if they take an offensive tackle there, they have a pretty early second-round pick. Patrick Queen, Kenneth Murray, guys that are supposed to go later in the first, could drop into that early second round, and they could have their linebacker right there. In the third, in the second and the third, there's also guys like Malik Harrison, guys that also could, you never know. They're solid picks. So if you're worried about defense, I think that you'll find guys in the second, third round, maybe even the fourth round. Antoine Winfield is a safety who's supposed to be a second-round guy. Kyle Duggar, Jeremy Chin. There's guys in that second and third round that you could go for if you like them. And I don't know what Gettleman is thinking right now about those guys, about any of those guys. I don't know what Gettleman's big board looks like, but
his computer guys are on it.
Exactly. But you gotta fill in that offensive tackle spot, protect that quarterback, and then see what comes to you in that second round.
Yeah, no doubt. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the Jets and the Giants. There are plenty of options for both, whether it's trading down or staying put and getting that franchise offensive lineman, getting that wide receiver for the Jets, or the Giants improving that defense massively. Eric, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Enjoy the draft.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Now time for the tweet of the week, where we scroll through Twitter all week because what else are we doing right now? And we find our favorites from the week, and we'll talk about it. When I was looking on Twitter this week, I saw a new person on Twitter. It's one of the favorites. Howie Rose, the Mets radio broadcaster, made a Twitter, and it is already gold. It is fantastic already. My favorite one so far, Ted, I'm sure you saw this. Derek Gould, one of the Cardinals writers, tweeted, Adam Wainwright and family on flattening the curve. It was a video of Wainwright, the rest of Major League Baseball, talking about flattening the curve in regards to the coronavirus. Howie Rose quote tweets it, saying, wish his curve would have flattened 14 years ago. Smiley face. Don't we all, Howie? Don't we all? All those Mets fans from 2006. Man, that 2006 team was so good and probably was better than the Cardinals that year. And it obviously didn't happen. But if the Mets passed the Cardinals in the NLCS in 2006, they probably were going to beat the Tigers in that World Series because the Mets were far better than the Tigers. You look at that Mets lineup from 2006, it was stacked when you got guys like Beltran and Delgado and Wright and Reyes, all in the primes of their careers. Everything was together for that team to win a World Series, and they just weren't able to because Adam Wainwright's nasty hook on Carlos Beltran ended that game.
Yeah, I mean, I was the other week on Twitter, speaking of the tweet of the week, I saw something trending among the MLB players where they were building a 5-pitch arsenal of any pitch from any pitcher in Major League Baseball history. I saw so many of these guys picking that Wainwright curve as their off speed, their breaking pitch. It was such a nasty pitch. I mean, killer to the Mets that year.
I mean, that's one of the all-time greatest curveballs I've ever seen. Him and Kershaw's curveball probably rank way at the top. I mean, I'm sure there are guys way back, but in recent memory, those two was pretty unhittable with those two curveballs. You can go Johan Santana's changeup. That's one of the best pitches I've seen in recent years, or Aroldis Chapman's fastball, whatever it is. But there have been great pitchers the last few years, and I think that's the best part of baseball and why we want it back so bad.
Right. I'm bored with you there, Brian.
All right, we'll move on now to our obscure player of the week. Last week, we went with Mets. Last week, Teddy went with Josh Edgin, and, I went with Nick Evans, and neither of those careers really worked out too well. We're going on the football side now with the NFL draft coming up. And for me, when we're talking about the Jets, like we did just a couple minutes ago, and we're talking about wide receivers and how the Jets need to surround Sam Darnold with weapons. You look at what they've done in recent years surrounding the quarterbacks with weapons on the outside, and it hasn't been good. The last time the Jets drafted a wide receiver was 2017. Ardarius Stewart was their third-round pick, 79th overall out of Alabama. Chad Hansen was their fourth-round pick, 141st overall out of Cal. And where are those two guys now? Well, Stewart is playing for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers of the Canadian Football League, and Hansen is with the Houston Texans. Probably not making a big factor there, but both of them played one season with the Jets, both in 2017, neither with over 10 receptions. They both had 80 to 90 yards, no touchdowns. You got to draft a difference maker at wide receiver. It's really time. I mean, the Jets just don't do well drafting wide receivers. Devin Smith, Stephen Hill, the better wide receivers that they've had over the last few years and, the last recent memory are guys that they signed in free agency or traded for. You got to draft a good wide receiver, and whether that comes in the first round or the second or the third or whatever it is, you got to do it this year because it's time for Sam Darnold to get the weapons that he deserves.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, and especially after hearing, if there was any doubt about that, after hearing about about you telling me the last time this team drafted wide receivers, gonna have to.
It's been 3 years since they drafted a wide receiver. They haven't had a good wide receiver since then.
It's nuts, and really, when you have a guy like Sam Darnold, it's a waste. I mean, you gotta if you want to see him succeed, which we already talked about, you have to build around him. That's crazy, and I can't even think of any real memories with Ardarius Stewart and Hansen. I don't think Hansen played. And Ardarius Stewart, if I remember, had a chance to return.
Hansen actually had more receptions than Stewart in 2017, 9-6.
Wow. Oh, okay. The reason I remember Stewart pretty well is if I'm correct, I believe he was on special teams. I believe he had some opportunities to return. That's why I remember that. I feel like I remember a fumble even. So I don't know. That might be if that's true, that might be my best memory of Ardarius Stewart. For my obscure player of the week, I had to go with, of course, another Jet. I went with former defensive back out of Oklahoma, Rodney Poole. Rodney Poole, I don't know if you remember him.
No, not at
played
all.
For the Jets. Not that surprising, but played for the Jets in 2010 and 2011. He was 26 and 27 in those years. That wound up being it for his career after that. He started his career, he was drafted to the Browns. So in the second round, 34th overall, so pretty early in that second round. Played 5 years for them. Had a decent stretch. He started over 10 games from 2007 until 2011. And then I'm not really sure what happened to him in that last year with the Jets. He started only 6 games out of 14 that he was active for, and just wasn't good enough to, and after that, I don't even know where he is anymore. I don't know what happened to him after that. His career was over. He hasn't played another NFL game since. Had a decent year for the Jets in that first year with them, but really not much else.
Yeah.
As obscure as it gets for a Jets defender. And now he played on a pretty solid Jets team too.
Right. He was on those AFC championship teams, but I can't even tell you that I remember his name, to be honest with you. That's how obscure he is. And, Jets need to draft some difference makers in this upcoming draft. Let's just leave it at that. How about that? All right. Enjoy the NFL draft coming up. We got, some sports things going on this weekend, so that should be fun to catch up on the NFL draft. More of the Jordan documentary on Sunday. We'll be back next week with more on the Metro. Maybe the Mets have a new owner. Maybe A-Rod and J-Lo are getting ready to throw all the money in the world at whoever it is to make the Mets a championship team. Hopefully, we have more news on whether sports coming back soon. Hopefully, you're doing well. And Ted, it was a blast.
Have a good one, man.
All right. We will talk to you soon. This has been the Metro, presented by Amazin Productions.